Welcome back to another story on Infidelity Tales Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Perfect Life Illusion. Frederick "Rick" Frazier had built what many would consider the perfect life. At 34, the former Marine gunnery sergeant commanded respect in his small Ohio town of Millbrook. His security consulting firm, Sentinel Solutions, specialized in high-end residential and corporate protection, drawing clients from 3 states. Rick's military precision and tactical expertise had earned him a reputation as the man to call when safety mattered most. His wife of 12 years, Molly Frazier, was Millbrook's golden girl. At 31, she ran the town's most successful real estate agency, inheriting both the business and her late father's political connections. Her auburn hair and emerald eyes had caught Rick's attention during his first week back from his final deployment, but it was her sharp business acumen that sealed their partnership. Together, they owned the sprawling Frazier estate on the hill overlooking the town, a testament to their combined success. Their daughter, 8-year-old Hannah Frazier, was the light of Rick's world. Sharp as her mother, but with her father's tactical mind, she'd already mastered chess and showed an uncanny ability to read people's intentions. Rick often joked that Hannah would either become a general or rule the world, possibly both. But perfection, Rick had learned in the Marines, was often the calm before the storm. The first crack appeared on a Tuesday evening in October. Rick returned from a 3-day security consultation in Columbus to find Molly on the phone, her voice unusually soft and filled with laughter he hadn't heard in months. She quickly ended the call when she saw him, claiming it was a client discussing a difficult property sale. Margaret Stewart's divorce is getting messy, Molly explained, not meeting his eyes. Her husband's fighting for the lake house. Rick's combat-honed instincts whispered warnings, but he pushed them aside. Marriage wasn't a battlefield, and paranoia was a luxury he couldn't afford in civilian life. Or so he thought. The second crack came 3 weeks later during Hannah's school play. Rick scanned the audience, a habit from his military days, when he spotted Molly texting furiously. Her fingers flew across the screen with an urgency that made his jaw tighten. When she noticed his stare, she quickly pocketed the phone. "Sorry, honey. Emergency with the Patterson listing," she whispered. But Rick had seen the contact name before she closed the phone. Officer Terry. His blood chilled. Terry Snyder, Millbrook's golden boy cop, divorced 2 years ago, and Molly's high school boyfriend before Rick entered the picture. The third crack shattered everything. Rick's security business required him to maintain relationships with local law enforcement. Detective Sam Carney, his oldest friend in the department, invited him for their monthly poker game at Murphy's Bar. The conversation flowed as freely as the whiskey until Sam's partner, Detective Will Bonner, made an offhand comment that stopped Rick's heart. "Terry's been walking on air lately," Will chuckled, dealing another hand. "Man's got a spring in his step like he's getting laid regular-like. Lucky bastard finally found someone willing to put up with his badge bunny complex." The room fell silent. Sam shot Will a warning look, but the damage was done. Rick's poker face, perfected through years of military interrogations, didn't crack, but inside, a cold fury began to build. Badge bunny complex. Terry's reputation for pursuing married women was an open secret in the department, though no one spoke about it directly. Terry always did like his conquests, Rick said carefully, his voice steady as granite. Some habits die hard. The game continued, but Rick's mind was elsewhere, cataloging every late-night Molly claimed to be showing houses, every canceled dinner due to difficult clients, every time she'd emerge from the shower smelling like unfamiliar cologne. He excused himself early, claiming fatigue from his latest consultation. But instead of heading home, Rick drove to his secondary office, a nondescript building downtown that housed his more specialized equipment. Hidden behind the legitimate security business was Rick's true expertise, intelligence gathering and tactical operations. His military record was spotless, but his methods in civilian life operated in grayer areas. Rick activated his surveillance system, cross-referencing phone records, credit card transactions, and GPS data. Within hours, the picture became devastatingly clear. hotel charges during his business trips, deleted text messages recovered from phone backups, GPS coordinates showing Molly's car at Terry's apartment during school hours. The evidence painted a picture of betrayal spanning 6 months. But what cut deepest was the recording he found on Molly's cloud storage, a conversation between her and Terry discussing their future plans. Rick's getting suspicious. Molly's voice whispered through his speakers. Maybe we should slow down. Relax, baby, Terry's voice responded. Your husband's a jarhead. All muscle, no brains. He'll never figure it out. And even if he does, what's he gonna do? I'm the law in this town. Rick's hands slowly clenched into fists as Terry continued. Besides, once we're married, Hannah will have a real father. Someone who can teach her respect for authority instead of that military bullshit. The recording ended, but Rick sat in the darkness for another hour, his mind working through scenarios with mechanical precision. In the Marines, betrayal was met with swift justice. In civilian life, the rules were different, but the stakes were higher. He wouldn't just expose them. He wouldn't simply divorce Molly and move on. Terry Snyder had made a fatal mistake by threatening Hannah's future and mocking Rick's service. In the Corps, they had a saying, no mercy for traitors. Rick Frazier was about to remind Millbrook why Marines were feared. Chapter 2. The Web of Deception. Rick spent the following 3 weeks becoming a ghost in his own life. To Molly and Hannah, he appeared unchanged, still the devoted husband and father, still managing his security business with military efficiency. But beneath the surface, Rick was conducting the most important reconnaissance mission of his life. His investigation revealed that Terry Snyder wasn't just sleeping with his wife. The corrupt cop had been laying groundwork for something far more sinister. Terry's personnel file, accessed through Rick's law enforcement contacts, showed a pattern of suspicious arrests, evidence tampering allegations that never quite stuck, and a disturbing number of domestic violence calls to his apartment that somehow disappeared from the system. But it was Terry's financial records that painted the most revealing picture. For a small-town police officer making $52,000 annually, Terry lived remarkably well. His apartment was upscale, his truck was brand new, and his credit card statement showed expensive dinners and weekend getaways that should have been impossible on his salary. Rick's military contacts proved invaluable. His former squad leader, now working private security in Chicago, helped him trace Terry's extra income to a network of corrupt cops running protection for local drug dealers. Terry wasn't just unfaithful. He was dirty, using his badge to intimidate witnesses and plant evidence on anyone who threatened his operation. Your boy's got friends in high places, Jeremiah Stewart, Rick's contact, explained during a secure phone call. Word is he's been feeding information to the Bassett crime family. They've got judges, prosecutors, even some feds on payroll. The revelation made Rick's blood run cold. Molly wasn't just cheating. She was unknowingly involved with organized crime. Worse, Terry's plan became crystal clear. Eliminate Rick, marry Molly for her political connections and real estate business, and use the Frazier family fortune to expand his criminal enterprise. Rick's surveillance of Molly revealed the depth of her betrayal. She wasn't just having an affair. She was actively planning his destruction. Hidden cameras in their home captured conversations between Molly and her sister, Dawn Nixon, where they discussed Terry's solution to the Rick problem. Terry says once Rick's out of the picture, everything will be so much easier. Molly confided to Dawn over wine in their kitchen. Rick's business connections, his military contacts, Terry can use all of it. And Hannah will finally have a father who's not damaged by war. Dawn, always the practical sister, raised concerns. But what if Rick finds out? You know what they say about his temper. Molly laughed, a sound that once filled Rick with joy but now cut like a blade. Terry's got it handled. He says there are ways to neutralize threats permanently. Police work has its benefits. Rick realized he was walking into a trap designed to either destroy his reputation or end his life. Terry wasn't just stealing his wife. He was planning to frame him for crimes that would send him to prison or worse. The corrupt cop had resources, connections, and the backing of organized crime. But Rick had something Terry underestimated: the tactical genius that made him one of the most decorated non-commissioned officers in Marine Corps history. He began building his own network. His security business provided legitimate cover to recruit assets. Former military personnel now working in law enforcement, private security, and government agencies. These weren't corrupt officials. They were patriots who understood the difference between justice and the law. Oliver Farrell, a former Navy SEAL now working for the FBI's Organized Crime Task Force, became Rick's inside man. Oliver had been tracking the Bassett family's police corruption for 2 years, but lacked the evidence needed for prosecution. Terry Snyder's a small fish, Oliver explained during a clandestine meeting in a Columbus parking garage. But he's connected to bigger problems. If we can flip him, we can take down the entire network. I'm not interested in flipping him, Rick replied coldly. I want him destroyed. Oliver studied Rick's face and saw something that made him take a step back. Jesus, Rick, I know they hurt you, but don't do anything stupid. These people are dangerous. So am I. Rick's plan began taking shape. He wouldn't just expose Terry and Molly. He would manipulate them into destroying themselves. Every move would be calculated, every consequence anticipated. He would use their own corruption against them, turning their weapons into instruments of their downfall. The first phase involved misdirection. Rick began deliberately leaving trails of evidence for Terry to find, making himself appear vulnerable and unaware. He staged phone conversations where Terry's surveillance devices would pick up discussions about valuable assets, overseas accounts, and business vulnerabilities that didn't actually exist. Meanwhile, Rick documented everything. Every meeting between Molly and Terry. Every criminal transaction Terry facilitated. Every piece of evidence that would eventually bury them both. Hannah remained oblivious to the storm brewing around her, but Rick noticed her quiet intelligence had picked up on tensions. She began asking pointed questions about Mommy's late-night phone calls and Daddy's frequent business trips. Daddy, Hannah said one evening as Rick tucked her into bed, are you and Mommy fighting? Rick's heart clenched. His daughter deserved better than the destruction about to unfold, but she also deserved the truth about who her mother really was. Sometimes adults have disagreements, sweetheart, he said carefully. But no matter what happens, you'll always be safe. Daddy promises. Hannah's green eyes, so much like her mother's, studied his face with unsettling intensity. Are the bad people trying to hurt us? The question stopped Rick cold. Hannah had inherited more than Molly's looks. She had Rick's tactical instincts. Somehow, his 8-year-old daughter sensed the danger better than the adults around her. No one will ever hurt you, Rick promised and meant it. Whatever was coming, Hannah would be protected. As November turned to December, Rick's investigation revealed the final piece of Terry's plan. The corrupt cop intended to frame Rick for drug possession during a traffic stop, using planted evidence and manufactured witness statements. The scheme would destroy Rick's security clearance, end his business, and send him to prison where Terry's criminal contacts would ensure he never came home. But Terry had made one crucial error. He'd underestimated the man he was trying to destroy. Rick Frazier had survived 3 combat deployments, earned 2 Bronze Stars, and commanded Marines in some of the most dangerous operations in modern military history. He'd faced enemies who understood warfare, honor, and the costs of battle. Terry Snyder was about to learn that there were fates worse than death, and Rick knew how to deliver them all. Chapter 3. The Trap Springs. December brought an early snow to Millbrook, blanketing the town in deceptive beauty. Rick used the weather to his advantage, knowing that winter conditions would limit escape routes and force his enemies into predictable patterns. His surveillance showed that Terry planned to execute his frame-up before Christmas, likely during one of Rick's scheduled business trips. The opportunity came sooner than expected. Rick received a call from a potential client in Cincinnati, a wealthy businessman requiring a comprehensive security assessment for his estate. The timing was perfect, 3 days away from Millbrook, giving Terry ample opportunity to plant evidence and prepare his trap. I'll miss you, Molly said as Rick packed his overnight bag, her performance Oscar-worthy. She even managed tears as she kissed him goodbye. Drive safely, honey. Rick pulled out of their driveway, knowing he would never return as the same man. By the time he came back, everyone in Millbrook would understand exactly who Frederick Frazier really was. But Rick never made it to Cincinnati. Instead, he drove to a safe house Oliver Farrell had arranged, a cabin 40 miles north of Millbrook where Rick could monitor Terry's activities without being detected. His surveillance network was now fully operational. Hidden cameras in his house, GPS trackers on Molly's car, and audio surveillance of Terry's apartment and patrol vehicle. The drama unfolded exactly as Rick anticipated. Within hours of his departure, Molly called Terry. "He's gone. You have 3 days." Terry's response chilled Rick's blood. "Baby, by the time I'm done, your husband will be facing 20 years minimum. And the best part? He'll never see it coming." That evening, Rick watched through his hidden cameras as Terry entered his house using a key Molly had provided. The corrupt cop moved through Rick's home like he owned it, touching Molly's belongings with possessive familiarity that made Rick's jaw clench. But it was Terry's interaction with Hannah that pushed Rick past the point of no return. "Hey there, sweetheart," Terry said, approaching Hannah as she did homework at the kitchen table. "How would you like to have a new daddy?" Hannah, wise beyond her years, looked up with suspicious eyes. "I already have a daddy." "Well, sometimes things change," Terry replied, his voice taking on an edge. "Sometimes bad daddies have to go away, and good daddies take their place." "My daddy's not bad," Hannah said firmly. "He protects people." Terry's laugh was cruel. "Your daddy's about to learn what happens to people who don't respect the law." Rick's hands trembled with rage as he watched Terry ruffle his daughter's hair with mock affection. The corrupt cop had just signed his own death warrant. The next morning, Terry began his operation. Rick watched through traffic cameras as the cop positioned himself along Route 7, the main highway leading back from Cincinnati. Terry had called in favors to ensure he'd be the responding officer to any traffic stops in that area, and he prepared a bag of cocaine specifically for planting in Rick's vehicle. But Rick wasn't coming from Cincinnati. Instead, he was 15 minutes away, watching Terry's every move through multiple surveillance feeds. Oliver Farrell's FBI task force was positioned discreetly throughout the area, recording everything. This wasn't just about destroying Terry. It was about dismantling the entire corruption network. At 2:30 p.m., Rick began his approach, driving his secondary vehicle, a nondescript sedan Terry wouldn't recognize. He activated the special recording device Oliver had provided, ensuring every word of the encounter would be captured in court-admissible quality. Rick's phone rang as he approached Terry's position. Molly's name appeared on the screen. "Honey," she said, her voice artificially concerned, "I just heard on the police scanner that there's been some kind of incident on Route 7. Please be careful driving home." "Thanks for the warning," Rick replied, his voice steady. "I'll be extra cautious." What Molly didn't know was that she'd just provided evidence of conspiracy. Her knowledge of Terry's location and timing proved her involvement in the setup. Rick rounded the bend and saw Terry's patrol car, positioned perfectly for an ambush. The corrupt cop activated his lights and pulled Rick over with predatory efficiency. "Step out," Terry yelled, approaching the car with theatrical aggression. "Get out of the vehicle now." Rick complied, his movements deliberately slow and non-threatening. He needed Terry to commit fully to the frame-up before revealing his hand. "Turn around. Hands behind your back." Terry snapped handcuffs on Rick's wrists while other officers arrived. Backup Terry had called to witness his heroic drug bust. Terry searched Rick's car with exaggerated thoroughness, his body camera recording every movement. Rick knew the corrupt cop would claim to find drugs hidden in the vehicle, providing evidence of Rick's criminal activity. "Look what I found." Terry held up a bag of white powder, addressing the camera and witness officers with dramatic flair. "Mr. Frazier, you're under arrest for possession of a controlled substance with intent to distribute." Rick's response was calm and measured. "Officer Snyder, I think you should check that evidence more carefully." Terry's confidence faltered slightly. "What did you say?" "I said you should check your evidence," Rick repeated. "Because it's not cocaine." Terry examined the bag more closely, his face paling as he realized the white powder was simple baking soda. Rick had anticipated the plant and replaced Terry's drugs with harmless substitutes days earlier. But the real trap was yet to spring. "Daddy," Hannah's voice rang out from the patrol car's back seat, where Rick had hidden her the night before as part of his elaborate counter-operation. Terry spun around, shocked to see the 8-year-old girl emerge from his own vehicle. "What the hell? I was playing games," Hannah announced loudly, holding up her iPad. "I recorded everything." The color drained from Terry's face as he realized the implications. Hannah had been hidden in his patrol car, recording his entire operation from inside the vehicle. Every word, every action, every moment of the frame-up was captured on video from an angle that would be impossible to dispute. Rick smiled coldly as Terry reached for Hannah. "I wouldn't touch her if I were you, Officer Snyder. Not with all these witnesses watching." The other officers looked confused, unsure what was happening, but increasingly uncomfortable with the situation. Rick could see them processing the implications. Why was a child in Terry's patrol car? How'd you get there? What was on that recording? "You're done, Marine," Terry snarled, desperation creeping into his voice. 20 years minimum. But his threats rang hollow. The trap had been sprung, and Terry was the one caught in its jaws. Rick's backup plan activated as FBI vehicles surrounded the scene. Oliver Farrell stepped out of an unmarked car, his badge prominently displayed. "Ladies and gentlemen," Oliver announced to the assembled officers, "you're all witnesses to a federal investigation into police corruption. Officer Snyder, you're under arrest." Terry's world collapsed in real time as he realized he'd been outmaneuvered by the jarhead he'd so thoroughly underestimated. The corrupt cop had walked into a trap so perfectly constructed that every move he made only tightened the noose around his neck. But Rick's revenge was just beginning. Chapter 4. The Unraveling. The Millbrook Police Department transformed into a federal crime scene within hours. Rick watched from Oliver Farrell's command vehicle as FBI agents systematically dismantled Terry Snyder's corruption network. Hannah's iPad video had provided the final piece of evidence needed to activate sealed federal warrants that had been prepared for months. "Your daughter's a natural operative," Oliver commented, reviewing Hannah's recording. "She got every angle, captured all the audio, and never missed a detail. Hell, she's better than half my surveillance teams." Rick felt a mixture of pride and sorrow watching his 8-year-old daughter demonstrate tactical intelligence that rivaled trained professionals. Hannah had inherited more than his instincts. She'd developed survival skills that no child should need. "She learned to read people by watching her mother lie," Rick said quietly. "Kids know when something's wrong, even when adults pretend otherwise." The federal investigation moved with military precision. Terry's apartment was raided simultaneously with the traffic stop, revealing evidence of his criminal enterprise. Cash bundles, burner phones, detailed records of bribes paid to judges and prosecutors, and photographs documenting his victims' activities. Terry hadn't just been corrupt. He'd been conducting surveillance on dozens of Millbrook residents, building blackmail material for future use. Among Terry's files, Rick discovered something that made his blood freeze. Detailed floor plans of the Fraser estate, surveillance photos of Hannah's school schedule, and a typed document titled Elimination Protocol. Terry hadn't just planned to frame Rick. He'd prepared to eliminate him permanently if the legal approach failed. "Jesus Christ," Oliver muttered, reading over Rick's shoulder. "This isn't corruption, it's domestic terrorism. How long has this bastard been planning your murder?" "Long enough to make detailed preparations," Rick replied, his voice cold as Arctic wind. "But not long enough to understand who he was targeting." The scope of Terry's criminal network shocked even federal investigators. Phone records reveal connections to organized crime families in 3 states, drug trafficking operations, and a human trafficking ring that used Millbrook as a way station. Terry's badge had provided perfect cover for criminal activities that generated over $2 million annually. But the most devastating revelation came from Terry's personal files, detailed plans to eliminate not just Rick, but eventually Hannah as well. Terry viewed Rick's daughter as a potential witness who might someday remember details that could expose his operation. The corrupt cop had already selected a foster family, criminal associates who specialized in making inconvenient children disappear permanently. Rick's hands trembled as he read Terry's notes about Hannah. Subject demonstrates unusual intelligence and observational skills. Potential long-term security risk. Recommend permanent solution after appropriate waiting period. He was going to kill my daughter, Rick said, his voice deadly quiet. Oliver had seen Rick angry before, but never like this. The Marine's calm exterior masked a rage so profound it seemed to alter the air around him. Rick, I know this is personal, but you need to let us handle this through proper channels. Proper channels? Rick laughed, a sound devoid of humor. Oliver, this man planned to murder my 8-year-old daughter. There are no proper channels for that. While federal agents processed Terry's apartment, Rick's attention turned to Molly. His wife remained at their house, unaware that her world was about to collapse. Rick's surveillance showed her frantically trying to contact Terry, growing increasingly panicked as her calls went unanswered. By evening, news of Terry's arrest had spread through Millbrook's law enforcement community. Molly finally understood something had gone catastrophically wrong with their plan. Rick watched through hidden cameras as she paced their bedroom, making desperate phone calls to criminal contacts Terry had introduced her to. "This is Molly Frazier," she said in her phone, her voice shaking. "Terry's been arrested. I need to know what that means for me." The response, captured clearly by Rick's surveillance, chilled his soul. "Mrs. Frazier, you've become a liability. We'll be in touch regarding cleanup protocols." Rick realized Molly's life was now in danger from Terry's criminal associates. Despite her betrayal, despite her willingness to participate in his destruction, she was still Hannah's mother. More importantly, she possessed information that could help federal investigators dismantle the entire network. But Rick's protective instincts warred with his desire for revenge. Molly had chosen her path, aligned herself with people who planned to murder their daughter. She deserved whatever consequences followed. His phone rang. Molly's name appeared on the screen. "Rick," she sobbed into the phone, her composure finally cracking. "Something terrible has happened. Terry's been arrested. I don't understand what's going on. Don't you?" Rick's voice was arctic. "Because I understand perfectly." The silence stretched between them, heavy with implication. Molly slowly realized Rick knew everything. "Rick, please. I can explain." "Explain what, Molly? Explain how you helped plan my murder? Explain how you were willing to let them kill Hannah? Explain how you sold our family to criminals?" Molly's sobs intensified. "You don't understand. Terry said you were involved in illegal activities. He said you were dangerous, that Hannah needed protection. Stop lying." Rick's command cut through her hysteria. "I have recordings, Molly. Every conversation, every plan, every detail of your betrayal. I know Terry's associates are coming for you. The question is, do you want to live long enough to see Hannah grow up?" "What do you mean?" "I mean Terry's criminal friends consider you a liability now. They're planning to eliminate loose ends. You have maybe 6 hours before they make their move." Molly's panic reached new heights. "Rick, please. You have to help me. I'm sorry. I was confused. I made mistakes." "You made choices," Rick corrected. "Now you live with consequences. But I'll offer you one opportunity for redemption. Tell the FBI everything you know about Terry's operation. Every name, every location, every detail. Help them destroy the network that planned to murder our daughter. And if I cooperate, then you might live long enough to explain to Hannah why her mother tried to have her father killed." Rick ended the call, leaving Molly to contemplate her limited options. He felt no satisfaction in her terror, only cold calculation. Molly's cooperation would help federal investigators, but more importantly, it would serve Rick's ultimate purpose, ensuring that everyone who threatened his family faced complete destruction. But Terry's criminal associates weren't Rick's only concern. The corrupt cop's arrest had triggered a larger conflict. The Bassett crime family, which had protected Terry's operation, now faced exposure through his captured files. They would move aggressively to eliminate witnesses and destroy evidence. Rick's war was expanding beyond personal revenge into something far more dangerous, a direct conflict with organized crime. But Frederick Frazier had spent years preparing for exactly this kind of battle. His security business provided cover for the weapons, equipment, and personnel needed to wage war against Terry's criminal network. As night fell on Millbrook, Rick made final preparations for the next phase of his operation. Terry's arrest was just the beginning. The corrupt cop's associates, the crime families that protected him, and every person who had threatened Hannah would learn why Marines never left enemies alive. Rick's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Your family's debt will be paid in blood." He smiled coldly and typed his response, "Come and collect." Chapter 5. War comes to Millbrook. Rick spent the next 48 hours transforming his home into a fortress. His security business had provided perfect cover for acquiring military-grade equipment. Thermal imaging systems, motion sensors, reinforced barriers, and enough firepower to outfit a Marine squad. If Terry's criminal associates wanted war, Rick would give him a conflict they'd never forget. Oliver Farrell's FBI task force established a command post in downtown Millbrook, but Rick knew federal protection had limitations. The Bassett crime family had survived decades of law enforcement pressure by eliminating witnesses before they could testify. They wouldn't hesitate to target Hannah to silence Molly's cooperation. "We can provide protective custody," Oliver offered during a secure meeting at the safe house. "Move your family to a federal facility until the trials conclude." "No." Rick's response was immediate and non-negotiable. "I won't spend years hiding from criminals, and I won't let them believe they can threaten my daughter without consequences." Oliver studied Rick's face and recognized the determination of a warrior preparing for his final battle. "Rick, these aren't street thugs. The Bassett family has killed federal agents, judges, prosecutors. They have resources you can't imagine. So do I." Rick's first move was eliminating the immediate threat to his family. Molly had agreed to federal protection in exchange for full cooperation, but her information revealed the scope of danger facing anyone connected to Terry's arrest. The Bassett family maintained a network of assassins, corrupt officials, and criminal contacts throughout the Midwest. They could strike anywhere, anytime, using methods that would appear accidental. But Rick had advantages they didn't expect. His security business had attracted clients from military, intelligence, and law enforcement communities. These weren't random contacts. They were warriors who understood honor, loyalty, and the difference between justice and law. The first attack came at midnight on the third day. Rick's thermal sensors detected 4 figures approaching the estate through the wooded areas surrounding his property. Professional killers, moving with tactical precision, armed with suppressed weapons and explosive devices. They'd studied the property layout and planned to eliminate everyone inside before local police could respond. They'd made one crucial error, assuming Rick would fight defensively. Instead of waiting for the attack, Rick went hunting. The first assassin died without knowing his target had become his predator. Rick moved through the winter darkness like a ghost, using terrain knowledge and military skills that far exceeded his enemy's criminal training. A knife to the throat, quick and silent, before dragging the body into concealment. The second killer realized something was wrong when his partner stopped responding to radio calls. He tried to retreat, calling for backup on encrypted channels. Rick intercepted the transmission using military-grade equipment, learning the assault team's full composition and backup plans. "This is Shadow 1, the surviving assassin reported. Primary target is armed and mobile. Recommend abort and implement fallback protocols." Rick smiled coldly. Fallback protocols meant targeting Hannah's school, Molly's federal safe house, or other locations where his family might be vulnerable. But Rick had anticipated this response and prepared accordingly. "Negative on abort," came the reply. "Asset too valuable to lose. Complete the mission." The criminal organization had just made a fatal mistake, prioritizing Rick's elimination over operational security. Their determination to kill him would provide the evidence needed to destroy their entire network. Rick eliminated the remaining assassins with mechanical efficiency, then used their communications equipment to monitor the organization's response. Backup teams were converging on Millbrook from 3 directions, while coordinators prepared strikes against federal safe houses and Hannah School. But Rick had spent weeks preparing for exactly this scenario. His former Marines had quietly moved into position throughout Millbrook during the previous 48 hours. Jeremiah Stewart commanded sniper teams positioned on strategic high ground. Dave Patterson and his explosives expertise had prepared kill zones along every route into town. Oliver Farrell's federal agents provided legal cover, but Rick's warriors would do the actual fighting. The battle for Millbrook began at dawn. Bassett family reinforcements arrived expecting to overwhelm local resistance, and eliminate witness quickly. Instead, they drove into the most sophisticated ambush since Operation Iraqi Freedom. Rick's communications center provided real-time intelligence, while his sniper teams engaged targets at maximum range. Contact, contact, contact! Jeremiah's voice crackled through encrypted radios. Multiple vehicles, northwest approach. Engaging now. The first criminal convoy never made it past the town limits. Dave Patterson's improvised explosive devices disabled their vehicles while sniper fire eliminated survivors attempting to flee on foot. The message was clear. Millbrook was now a war zone, and Marines on the battlefield. The Bassett family's response escalated quickly. They called in reinforcements from other crime families, corrupt law enforcement officials, and hired mercenaries. What had begun as a simple witness elimination had become a full-scale military operation. But escalation worked in Rick's favor. Every criminal reinforcement meant more evidence of the conspiracy. Every corrupt official who participated meant additional federal charges. Every escalating action provided justification for Rick's increasingly brutal response. By noon, 15 criminals were dead. Federal agents had arrested 12 corrupt officials, and the Bassett family faced the largest organized crime investigation in Ohio history. The war they'd started to silence witnesses had instead exposed their entire operation to federal scrutiny. Rick received a call from an unknown number, the same criminal contact who'd threatened his family days earlier. Frazier, the voice was older now, tired. This ends now. You've cost us too much. Name your price for walking away. My price. Rick laughed. You threatened to kill my 8-year-old daughter. There's no price. Everyone has a price. Money, power, protection. I want bodies, Rick interrupted. Every person who planned to hurt Hannah. Every person who facilitated Terry's operation. Every person who thought they could threaten a Marine's family. I want them all dead or in federal prison. That's not negotiation. That's war. Exactly. Rick ended the call, knowing the Bassett family would interpret his refusal as weakness. They'd assume overwhelming force could still achieve their objectives. They were about to learn why Marines were called devil dogs by their enemies. The second wave arrived that evening. 30 criminals armed with military weapons, supported by corrupt police officers and hired mercenaries. They moved through Millbrook like an occupying army, prepared to kill anyone who resisted their search for Rick and his family. They'd made their final mistake. Rick's response wasn't just tactical. It was personal. These criminals had transformed his hometown into a battlefield, threatened his neighbors, and traumatized his daughter. Military justice demanded proportional response. Marine justice demanded total annihilation. The battle lasted 3 hours and ended with every criminal either dead or in federal custody. Rick's precision shooting accounted for 7 kills, but his greatest satisfaction came from capturing the operations coordinator alive. You're going to tell federal agents everything. Rick informed the wounded criminal. Every name, every location, every detail of your organization. You're going to destroy your own people to save your worthless life. Go to hell, Marine. Rick's smile was Arctic cold. I've been there. Now it's your turn. Chapter 6. The Hunter Becomes the Hunted. The Battle of Millbrook, as federal agents dubbed it, had destroyed the Bassett family's operational capabilities in Ohio. 23 criminals dead, 47 arrested, and evidence linking the organization to over 200 unsolved crimes. But victory carried unexpected consequences for Rick and his family. The media attention was immediate and overwhelming. Within hours, news crews from across the Midwest descended on Millbrook to cover the story of a former Marine who'd single-handedly dismantled a criminal empire. Rick's military record, his successful business, and his family's betrayal became national news. War hero defends family against corruption, read the headlines. But Rick knew the attention made his family more vulnerable, not less. Criminal organizations across the country now viewed him as a threat to their operations. Federal protection could only extend so far. Hannah adapted to their new reality with disturbing ease. The 8-year-old understood they were in danger and accepted security measures that would traumatize most children. She learned to identify potential threats, follow escape protocols, and operate communications equipment with military precision. "Daddy," she said one morning over breakfast, "are the bad people still coming?" "Some of them," Rick answered honestly. "But we're ready for them." Hannah nodded seriously. "Good. They shouldn't have tried to hurt us." Rick saw his own determination reflected in his daughter's green eyes and realized she'd inherited more than tactical intelligence. She developed the warrior mindset necessary for survival. Part of him felt proud. Part of him mourned the innocence she'd lost. Molly's federal debriefing revealed the true scope of Terry's criminal network. The corrupt cop hadn't just been taking bribes. He'd been recruiting other law enforcement officers, establishing cells of criminal activity in multiple states, and planning to expand into human trafficking and drug distribution. "Your wife provided crucial intelligence," Oliver reported during one of their secure meetings. "We've identified over 60 corrupt officials, 12 criminal organizations, and evidence of federal crimes dating back 15 years. She's probably saved hundreds of lives." And Terry, facing life without parole on federal charges. His cooperation won't save him. He planned to murder a child. Even criminal organizations have limits. But Rick's satisfaction was tempered by new intelligence about remaining threats. The Bassett family's destruction had created a power vacuum that other criminal organizations sought to fill. 3 separate crime families were now operating in Ohio, each viewing Rick as either a potential ally or a target for elimination. The first approach came from the Cunningham family, a Detroit-based organization seeking to expand into Ohio. Their representative, a well-dressed man named Reginald Cunningham, arrived at Rick's office with an offer of partnership. "Mr. Frazier," Cunningham said, settling into a chair across from Rick's desk, "you've demonstrated remarkable capabilities. My organization could use someone with your skills." "I'm not interested in criminal activities," Rick replied coldly. "Who said anything about crime?" Cunningham smiled. "Security consulting, protection services, intelligence gathering, all legitimate businesses. The fact that our clients sometimes operate outside conventional legal boundaries is irrelevant." Rick studied the man across from him, recognizing the predatory intelligence of a career criminal. Cunningham wasn't making an offer. He was issuing a subtle threat. "Let me be clear," Rick said, his voice carrying the authority of command. "I killed 23 of your competitors. I'll kill you just as easily if you threaten my family." Cunningham's smile faltered. "Mr. Frazier, I think you misunderstand." "No, a misunderstanding." Rick leaned forward. "You have 60 seconds to leave my office. After that, I treat you as a hostile target." The criminal left quickly, but Rick knew the encounter had established dangerous precedent. Word would spread that Frederick Frazier couldn't be bought, couldn't be intimidated, and wouldn't tolerate any threats to his family. Some organizations would respect those boundaries. Others would view them as challenges to overcome. The second approach came from federal agencies seeking to recruit Rick's capabilities. Oliver Farrell served as intermediary for discussions about Rick joining various task forces focused on organized crime, domestic terrorism, and international security threats. "Your tactical expertise could save lives," Oliver explained. "Working with us would provide official protection for your family while utilizing your skills against legitimate targets." "Define legitimate," Rick said. "Terrorists, foreign agents, criminal organizations that threaten national security. People like Terry Snyder?" Oliver nodded. "Exactly like Terry Snyder." Rick considered the offer carefully. Federal employment would provide resources, legal protection, and official sanction for activities that currently operated in gray areas. But it would also limit his ability to protect his family using methods that exceeded government authorization. "I'll consider it," Rick said finally. "But my family comes first. Always." The third approach was the most dangerous. Criminal organizations seeking revenge for the Bassett family's destruction. These weren't business propositions or recruitment offers. They were assassination attempts designed to restore criminal prestige by eliminating the Marine who'd humiliated their operations. The first attempt came at Hannah's school. Rick's security team detected surveillance vehicles positioned around the building during school hours. The watchers weren't planning immediate attack. They were gathering intelligence about Hannah's schedule, security procedures, and potential vulnerabilities. Rick's response was swift and brutal. He tracked the surveillance team to their safe house and eliminated all 3 men with tactical precision. No warnings, no negotiations, no mercy. Anyone who targeted his daughter forfeited their right to live. But each successful defense generated new threats. Criminal organizations began viewing Rick as a high-value target whose elimination would enhance their reputations. The man who destroyed the Bassett family became a prize worth pursuing. Rick realized he was fighting a war that couldn't be won through defensive measures. Every criminal he killed generated more enemies. Every threat he eliminated created others. His family would never be safe as long as criminal organizations viewed them as profitable targets. The solution required changing the fundamental equation. Instead of defending against criminal attacks, Rick would eliminate the attackers before they could strike. Preemptive warfare, conducted with the precision and ruthlessness that had made him one of the Marine Corps' most decorated warriors. "I'm going hunting," Rick informed Oliver during their next meeting. "What does that mean?" "It means every criminal organization that threatens my family will be systematically destroyed. Not arrested, not prosecuted, eliminated. Completely and permanently." Oliver looked troubled. "Rick, that's vigilante justice. It's illegal, dangerous, and likely to get you killed." Terry Snyder was illegal. His criminal network was dangerous. And they tried to kill my daughter. Rick's voice carried the finality of absolute determination. "I gave them chances to leave us alone. Now they face consequences." Rick's transformation from defender to predator marked a new phase in his war against organized crime. He would no longer wait for criminals to threaten his family. He would hunt them down with a systematic efficiency that had made Marines feared worldwide. The hunter had become the hunted, but Frederick Frazier intended to be the last man standing when the shooting stopped. Chapter 7. The Predator Unleashed. Rick's transition from defender to hunter required resources that exceeded his security business capabilities. Fortunately, his military contacts included personnel specializing in exactly the kind of operations he now planned to conduct. Within weeks, Sentinel Solutions had quietly expanded to include former special operations personnel, intelligence specialists, and weapons experts who understood the difference between law enforcement and warfare. Jeremiah Stewart became Rick's operational commander, coordinating intelligence, gathering, and target acquisition. Dave Patterson handled logistics and equipment procurement. Oliver Farrell provided federal intelligence, while maintaining plausible deniability about Rick's more aggressive operations. Their first target was the Cunningham family in Detroit. Reginald Cunningham's business proposition had been intelligence gathering, not negotiation. His organization was already planning Hannah's kidnapping as leverage to force Rick's cooperation. "They've rented a house 12 miles from Hannah's school," Jeremiah reported during their weekly briefing. 6 men, professional kidnappers, equipped with surveillance gear and restraint equipment. They're planning to grab her during the field trip to the Science Museum next week. Rick studied the photographs of the house, noting sight lines, escape routes, and defensive positions. The criminals had chosen well: isolated location, multiple exit routes, and minimal civilian presence. Under normal circumstances, it would be an ideal base for criminal operations. But Rick wasn't planning a normal response. "How many?" Rick asked. "Total organization?" 43 known associates, 17 core family members, and connections to 3 other crime families. They generate approximately $8 million annually through drug distribution, human trafficking, and protection rackets. Assets: 12 legitimate businesses, 6 properties, and bank accounts in 4 states. Federal agencies have been trying to prosecute them for 8 years, but witnesses keep disappearing. Rick nodded. The Cunningham family represented exactly the kind of criminal organization that thrived by intimidating law enforcement and eliminating opposition. They'd calculated that threatening his daughter would force his cooperation, never considering that they'd signed their own death warrants. Operational timeline: 72 hours for complete elimination, Jeremiah replied. "Hit the safe house first. then systematically work through their hierarchy. Leave no survivors who might reorganize later. Rick approved the plan with military precision. This wouldn't be a law enforcement operation focused on arrests and prosecutions. It would be systematic elimination of hostile forces threatening his family. The assault on the safe house began at 0300 hours. Rick's team moved with special operations precision, using night vision and suppressed weapons to eliminate sentries before they could raise alarms. The 6 kidnappers died in their sleep, never knowing their intended victim's father had become their executioner. But Rick's vengeance extended beyond immediate threats. Over the following week, Cunningham family associates began disappearing. Drug dealers found dead in apparent gang violence. Money launderers discovered murdered in their homes. Criminal operatives eliminated with precision that suggested professional assassins rather than rival gang activity. Reginald Cunningham himself lasted 4 days before Rick cornered him in a Detroit parking garage. The crime boss had surrounded himself with bodyguards and electronic security, but Rick's military training made such precautions irrelevant. "You killed my people," Cunningham accused, his voice shaking despite attempts to project authority. "You threatened my daughter," Rick replied calmly. "Did you expect different consequences? This is business. You can't just murder." Rick's knife into the conversation in Cunningham's life. The crime boss died knowing that Frederick Frazier didn't distinguish between criminal threats and enemy combatants. Both faced identical fates. News of the Cunningham family's destruction spread quickly through criminal networks nationwide. Within days, Rick received messages from other organizations either offering alliance or demanding he cease operations in their territories. His response was consistent: leave his family alone or face complete annihilation. Some criminal leaders interpreted this as bluster. The Romano family from Cleveland decided Rick's reputation was exaggerated and began planning their own operations against his family. They lasted 6 days before Rick eliminated their leadership and scattered their surviving associates. But Rick's success attracted unwanted attention from law enforcement agencies investigating the sudden wave of criminal deaths across the Midwest. Federal agents couldn't directly link the killings to Rick, but the timing and precision suggested military-trained operators rather than rival gang violence. "You're starting to generate heat," Oliver warned during one of their clandestine meetings. "My superiors are asking questions about the sudden reduction in organized crime activity." "Tell them criminals are killing each other over territory disputes," Rick suggested. "That might work for a few more weeks, but eventually someone's going to connect the dots. When that happens, you'll be facing federal investigation instead of criminal threats." Rick considered this development carefully. He'd always known his war against organized crime would eventually attract law enforcement attention. The question was whether he could eliminate enough threats before federal agencies interfered with his operations. "How long do I have?" "Maybe a month before formal investigation begins. After that, you'll need to either go underground or find legal protection for your activities." Rick's solution was characteristically direct: accelerate operations to eliminate remaining threats before federal oversight became prohibitive. If law enforcement wanted to investigate him for destroying criminal organizations, they could do so after his family was safe from retaliation. The next 3 weeks became known in criminal circles as the cleansing. Rick's team systematically eliminated every organized crime figure who'd expressed interest in his family or operations. Drug dealers, human traffickers, corrupt officials, and criminal enforcers died so quickly that surviving criminals began fleeing Ohio rather than risk confronting the Marine who'd become their personal nightmare. Hannah adapted to their increasingly militarized lifestyle with disturbing ease. She learned to recognize surveillance, follow escape protocols, and communicate with Rick's security team using military terminology. Her childhood innocence had been replaced by tactical awareness that rivaled trained professionals. "Daddy," she said one evening as Rick tucked her into bed, "when will the bad people stop coming?" "Soon, sweetheart," Rick promised. "Very soon." "Good," Hannah replied seriously. "I want to go back to being a normal kid." Rick's heart clenched as he realized his 8-year-old daughter was ready to sacrifice her childhood for family security. She understood the stakes better than most adults and accepted whatever measures were necessary for survival. But Hannah's words crystallized Rick's ultimate objective, creating a world where his daughter could grow up without fear of criminal retaliation. That required more than defensive measures or tactical elimination of threats. It required fundamentally changing how criminal organizations viewed the Fraser family. Rick's final phase would send a message that transcended individual threats or specific criminal operations. It would establish a precedent so brutal and comprehensive that no future criminal would dare threaten his family again. The Predator was about to become a legend. Chapter 8. The Legend Born. Rick's final operation began with intelligence that changed everything. Oliver Farrell's federal contacts had uncovered a coordination meeting scheduled for criminal organizations across the Midwest. 7 families were gathering to discuss the Fraser problem and coordinate a unified response to his systematic elimination of their associates. They're calling it the Toledo Conference, Oliver explained, spreading surveillance photos across Rick's desk. 63 confirmed attendees, including every major crime boss between Chicago and Pittsburgh. They're planning to pool resources for one massive strike against your family. Rick studied the photographs, recognizing faces from FBI wanted posters and intelligence files. These weren't street criminals or minor operators. They were the leadership of organized crime across multiple states. Their gathering represented the largest concentration of criminal authority in decades. When and where? Tomorrow night. Warehouse complex in Toledo, chosen for isolation and security. They've hired military contractors for protection, established multiple perimeters, and planned escape routes in case of law enforcement interference. Rick smiled coldly. The criminals were preparing for a meeting that would define their future operations against his family. They'd never considered that their gathering might become their massacre. Perfect, Rick said. How many of our people can we mobilize in 24 hours? Jeremiah Stewart, who'd been reviewing tactical assessments, looked up sharply. Rick, you can't be serious. 63 targets in one location, military-grade security, backup from multiple crime families. This isn't a surgical strike. This is full-scale warfare. Exactly. Rick's determination was absolute. They're gathering to plan my family's destruction. I'm going to ensure they never have another chance. Oliver looked troubled. Rick, attacking that meeting would be mass murder. Even if you succeed, federal law enforcement would have no choice but to prosecute. This goes beyond vigilante justice into domestic terrorism. These people plan to kidnap and murder my 8-year-old daughter, Rick replied. They've forfeited any right to legal protection. Rick's team spent 18 hours planning an operation that would have challenged a military special forces unit. The warehouse complex offered limited approach routes, multiple defensive positions, and professional security that exceeded anything they'd previously encountered. Success would require precision timing, overwhelming firepower, and willingness to accept casualties. But Rick had advantages the criminals couldn't anticipate. His security business provided access to military equipment, surveillance technology, and weapon systems that exceeded most law enforcement capabilities. More importantly, his team consisted of warriors motivated by more than money. They were fighting to protect one of their own. The assault began at 2,100 hours with simultaneous strikes against the conference's security perimeters. Dave Patterson's explosive charges eliminated guard posts, while sniper teams engaged rooftop sentries. Within minutes, the warehouse complex transformed from secure meeting location to active battleground. All call signs. Rick's voice carried over encrypted communications. Time to send a message. The criminal leadership found themselves trapped in a building designed to keep law enforcement out, but equally effective at preventing escape. Rick's team moved through the complex with military precision, systematically eliminating targets while avoiding civilian casualties. Please, one crime boss begged as Rick approached his hiding position. I have family, children. So do I, Rick replied, and pulled the trigger. The Toledo conference lasted 47 minutes. When federal agents arrived, drawn by reports of sustained gunfire, they found 63 dead criminals and evidence of the most sophisticated organized crime gathering in American history. Rick's team had disappeared into the night, leaving behind only bodies and a message written in blood. This is what happens to people who threaten the Frazier family. The aftermath transformed Rick from regional threat to national legend. Criminal organizations across the country began referring to him as the Ghost, a former Marine who could eliminate entire crime families without leaving evidence for prosecution. Stories spread about his tactical capabilities, his ruthless efficiency, and his absolute dedication to protecting his daughter. More importantly, the Toledo Massacre established a precedent that fundamentally changed how organized crime viewed Rick and his family. No criminal leader was willing to risk confronting the man who'd single-handedly eliminated the Midwest's most powerful crime bosses. "Congratulations," Oliver said during their final meeting. "You've achieved something law enforcement couldn't accomplish in decades. Criminals are actually afraid to operate in Ohio." "Good," Rick replied. "That was the objective. But you realize this can't continue, right? Federal agencies are launching full investigations. Even with my protection, you'll eventually face prosecution for mass murder." Rick nodded. He'd always known his war against organized crime would have legal consequences. The question was whether those consequences mattered compared to his family's safety. "I'm retiring from active operations," Rick announced. "Sentinel Solutions will return to legitimate security consulting. My war is over." Oliver looked surprised. Just like that. Just like that. The message has been sent. Every criminal in America knows what happens to people who threaten my family. That protection is worth any legal consequences. Rick's retirement from active warfare marked the beginning of a new chapter for his family. Hannah could finally attend school without bodyguards, play with friends without security protocols, and begin recovering the childhood innocence that criminal threats had stolen. But Rick remained vigilant. His intelligence network continued monitoring potential threats, and his weapons cache remained ready for immediate deployment. He'd achieved peace through overwhelming violence, but maintaining that peace required constant preparation for war. "Daddy," Hannah said one evening as they walked through downtown Millbrook, "are we safe now?" Rick looked around at the town that had become his battlefield, noting the federal surveillance teams that still monitored his activities and the criminal informants who reported his movements to organizations considering future operations. "Yes, sweetheart," he said finally, "we're safe." And for the first time in months, Rick believed it was true. Chapter 9. The Price of Peace. 6 months after the Toledo Massacre, Rick Frazier's life had achieved the stability he'd fought so brutally to secure. Hannah attended school without security escorts, played with friends without surveillance protocols, and demonstrated the resilience that made Rick proud of her strength while mourning her lost innocence. Sentinel Solutions thrived as a legitimate security business, drawing clients who valued Rick's reputation for absolute protection. Corporate executives, federal judges, and wealthy families sought services from the man who'd proven capable of eliminating any threat to his client's safety. Rick's military precision and tactical expertise commanded premium prices, but more importantly, they provided legal cover for maintaining the resources necessary to protect his family. Oliver Farrell had successfully misdirected federal investigations away from Rick's activities. The Toledo Massacre was officially classified as a territorial war between rival crime families, with forensic evidence conveniently destroyed in a warehouse fire that eliminated potential criminal prosecution. Rick's team had vanished like ghosts, leaving only dead criminals and questions that federal agencies chose not to pursue too aggressively. "You've achieved something remarkable," Oliver commented during one of their periodic meetings. "Organized crime activity in Ohio has dropped 70% since Toledo. You've single-handedly accomplished what law enforcement couldn't achieve in decades." Rick nodded, but his satisfaction was tempered by ongoing vigilance. Peace was a temporary condition that required constant maintenance. Criminal organizations still monitored his activities, federal agencies maintained discreet surveillance, and new threats emerged regularly from unexpected directions. The first test of his new status came from an international source. The Volkov crime family, recently arrived from Eastern Europe, began establishing operations in Cleveland without realizing they were entering Rick's sphere of influence. Their initial activities, drug distribution and human trafficking, didn't directly threaten his family, but their expansion plans included eliminating potential competitors. "They're asking questions about you," Jeremiah Stewart reported during a routine briefing. Specifically, they want to know if your reputation is real or manufactured. What kind of questions? Whether you're actually capable of the things attributed to you, or if you're just benefiting from exaggerated stories. They think American criminals are weak compared to their European counterparts. Rick considered this development carefully. The Volkov family's skepticism represented exactly the kind of challenge that could destabilize the peace he'd established. Other criminal organizations were watching to see if he would respond to international threats with the same ruthlessness he'd demonstrated against domestic enemies. Arrange a meeting, Rick decided. Let's educate them about American hospitality. The meeting took place in neutral territory, a restaurant downtown Millbrook that Rick controlled through surveillance and tactical positioning. Viktor Volkov, the family patriarch, arrived with 2 bodyguards and an interpreter, clearly expecting negotiations rather than confrontation. "Mr. Fraser," Victor began through his translator, "we understand you have established certain territorial claims in this region. My organization seeks accommodation for mutually profitable activities." "What kind of activities?" Rick asked. "Import, export, financial services, entertainment venues, legitimate businesses that generate substantial revenue." Rick recognized the euphemisms: drug smuggling, money laundering, and prostitution. The Volkov family was offering to share profits in exchange for operating without interference, never realizing they were negotiating with someone who viewed their existence as a threat requiring elimination. "I have a counter-proposal," Rick said calmly. "You have 24 hours to leave Ohio. Anyone who remains after that deadline will be considered an enemy combatant." Victor's expression darkened as the translator conveyed Rick's words. "Mr. Fraser, I don't think you understand who you're dealing with." "I understand perfectly. You're criminals who think geographic distance makes you immune to consequences. You're wrong." The meeting ended with Victor storming out, clearly believing Rick's reputation was exaggerated. The Russian crime boss had operated in environments where negotiations were conducted through violence and intimidation. He'd never encountered someone who viewed criminal existence as justification for immediate execution. Victor's response was swift and predictable. 3 days later, surveillance devices appeared around Rick's property and Hannah's school. Volkov operatives began gathering intelligence about family routines, security procedures, and potential vulnerabilities. They were preparing for either kidnapping or assassination, depending on which option would better demonstrate their dominance. Rick's counter-response was even swifter. The Volkov safe house in Cleveland was hit at 0200 hours by a team that moved with military precision. Suppressed weapons eliminated sentries before they could raise alarms. Explosive charges breached defensive positions, and systematic room-clearing techniques ensured no survivors remained to report the attack. Viktor Volkov himself died in his bedroom. His bodyguards eliminated seconds before Rick's knife found the crime boss's throat. The Russian's final words were in his native language, but Rick's translator provided the meaning. "This is impossible." "Nothing's impossible," Rick replied. "Some things just require proper motivation." The Volkov family's destruction sent ripples through international criminal networks. European crime families began warning their American counterparts about the Marine who killed with surgical precision, while domestic organizations used Rick's expanding reputation to justify avoiding Ohio entirely. But Rick's greatest challenge came from an unexpected source: Hannah herself. His daughter had adapted to their militarized lifestyle with disturbing ease, but her 8th birthday brought questions that Rick hadn't anticipated. Hannah was old enough to understand that other families didn't live surrounded by security systems, that other fathers didn't disappear for days on business trips that generated no visible income, and that other children didn't practice escape protocols instead of playing games. "Daddy," Hannah said one evening as Rick reviewed security reports, "why do people keep trying to hurt us?" Rick looked up from his files, studying his daughter's serious expression. Hannah had inherited her mother's intelligence and her father's tactical instincts, making her far more perceptive than most adults realized. Because some people make bad choices, Rick answered carefully. And those choices have consequences. But why do you have to be the one who gives them consequences? The question stopped Rick cold. Hannah wasn't asking about criminal threats or security measures. She was questioning the fundamental morality of his actions. His 8-year-old daughter had reached the same ethical concerns that federal agents and military commanders struggled to address. Because if I don't, they'll hurt innocent people, Rick said finally. Sometimes protecting family requires making difficult decisions. Hannah nodded solemnly, but Rick could see her processing implications that no child should need to consider. His daughter was growing up in a world where violence was normal, where death was routine, and where her father's reputation depended on his willingness to kill anyone who threatened their safety. "Understand, Daddy," Hannah said quietly, "but I wish things were different." Rick's heart clenched as he realized the full cost of his war against organized crime. He'd achieved the security he'd fought for, eliminated the threats that had endangered his family, and established a reputation that would protect them for years to come. But that victory had required sacrificing Hannah's innocence, normalizing violence, and teaching his daughter that survival depended on her father's willingness to kill. "So do I, sweetheart," Rick admitted. "So do I." That night, Rick made a decision that would define the rest of their lives. He would maintain the security infrastructure necessary to protect his family, but he would also work to give Hannah the normal childhood she deserved. No more tactical training, no more security protocols, no more exposure to the violence that had become routine in their lives. Frederick Frazier had won his war against organized crime, but the victory had cost more than he'd anticipated. Peace was possible, but only through accepting that some battles scarred the very people they were fought to protect. As Rick watched Hannah sleep, he made a final promise. No matter what future threats emerged, his daughter would never again pay the price for his enemy's mistakes. The warrior could rest, but the father's vigilance would never end. Epilogue. 2 years later, Millbrook had become known as the safest town in Ohio. Crime statistics showed remarkable improvements. Property values had soared, and federal agencies quietly credited the Frazier effect for transforming the region's criminal landscape. Rick's security business thrived, but he focused on legitimate protection services rather than offensive operations. His reputation ensured that potential criminals avoided his territory, while his wealth allowed Hannah to attend private school and pursue the normal childhood activities that had been impossible during their war years. Hannah grew into a remarkably mature young lady who understood her family's unique history, but refused to let it define her future. She excelled academically, participated in school activities, and formed friendships with children who would never know how close they'd come to living in a town controlled by organized crime. Molly served 18 months in federal prison for conspiracy charges, but her cooperation with investigators had helped dismantle criminal networks across multiple states. Upon release, she moved to California, maintaining limited contact with Hannah through supervised visits. Rick had forgiven her for practical reasons. Hannah needed to know her mother, but their marriage was permanently ended. Terry Snyder died in federal prison, killed by inmates who discovered his plans to murder a child. Rick felt no satisfaction in the corrupt cop's death, only relief that one more threat to his family had been eliminated. The legend of Frederick Frazier continued growing in criminal circles, becoming a cautionary tale about the consequences of threatening the wrong person's family. New criminal organizations entering the Midwest were briefed about the Marine who'd eliminated the region's most powerful crime families, ensuring that Rick's reputation provided ongoing protection for his daughter. As Rick watched Hannah blow out candles on her 10th birthday cake, surrounded by friends and laughter, he reflected on the price of peace. His war had cost him his marriage, his innocence, and years of normal family life. But it had also secured his daughter's future, eliminated threats that would have destroyed countless other families, and established a legacy that would protect them both for decades to come. Frederick Frazier had learned that some battles could only be won through absolute commitment to victory, regardless of cost. The warrior had found peace, but only by proving that some people were too dangerous to threaten, too prepared to defend their loved ones, and too ruthless to allow enemies to survive their mistakes. In Millbrook, Ohio, peace was more than the absence of war. It was the presence of someone willing to fight for it. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.